Look at you, sitting there right now with your boring little life. No private jet, no six-pack abs, not on a beach in Bali. Just several emails waiting for a response, a chair currently functioning as a wardrobe, and some laundry you're hoping will eventually develop the initiative to fold itself. Damn. Me too. Look at us. Two people accomplishing absolutely nothing cinematic. Except your life probably isn't boring. It only feels that way because you just spent the last hour comparing it with the best 12 seconds from 300 other lives. Of course yours lost. It was the only one forced to compete in full length. You watched somebody buy a Lamborghini, somebody get engaged beneath the northern lights. A 19-year-old millionaire explained that poverty is mostly a scheduling issue. Then you looked up at your own perfectly ordinary Thursday and thought, is this it? Yes, mostly. Life in its original format contains a disturbing amount of washing dishes. And here's the nasty little trick. You probably felt perfectly fine before you opened the app. Nothing about your life changed while you were scrolling. Your standards did. The internet didn't just steal your attention. It taught you that life only counts when it is impressive enough to make strangers jealous. Now peace feels like stagnation, privacy feels like irrelevance, and ordinary happiness feels suspiciously underproduced. Your life didn't become empty. You were trained to find it insufficient. And once ordinary life stops feeling like enough, you become extremely easy to sell to. A better body, a better holiday, a better apartment, a better morning routine, a better personality. Convenient, isn't it? First, the internet convinced you that your life was boring. Then, it placed an advertisement beneath the diagnosis. And the diagnosis is always the same. Somewhere, someone your age is living correctly, and you have somehow missed the bloody orientation. They wake up at 5, they meditate, they run 7 kilometers before sunrise, while you are still negotiating with the alarm clock like a hostage mediator. By 8, they have exercised, journaled, read 40 pages, made a breakfast containing a seed you cannot pronounce, and founded a small technology company. You have located one sock. The internet takes exceptional moments from millions of people and places them in one continuous feed. Your brain then makes the perfectly reasonable decision to treat this statistical freak show as the neighborhood average. One person is richer than you. Another is fitter. Another has a better relationship. Another lives in a nicer house. Another has apparently achieved inner peace at 23, which is frankly suspicious. No single person has everything you're seeing. But the feed does, so you're no longer comparing yourself with another human being. You're comparing yourself with a creature assembled from the finest body, house, career, holiday, relationship, and breakfast on the planet. Of course you feel inadequate. You've invented a god and given it an Instagram account. And this is where it gets embarrassing. The internet is not merely showing you lives you could have lived. It is making your actual life feel like the disappointing loading screen before the real one begins. That is why you keep waiting until you earn more, look better, move somewhere exciting, meet someone perfect, become disciplined, become admired, become the sort of person who owns matching food containers and never has unidentified cables in a drawer. Then finally, life will begin. Any day now. It has only been several years. Meanwhile, your real life is happening quietly in the background, like an employee nobody invited to the meeting. And because it doesn't resemble the montage in your head, you barely notice it. You eat with someone you love, but the restaurant isn't beautiful enough. You take a walk, but the sky is merely acceptable. You have a calm weekend, but nobody flew anywhere, transformed their body, or announced a dramatic career pivot. So Monday arrives, and it feels as though nothing happened. But something did happen. You lived 2 entire days. They just weren't edited. That distinction matters, because boring is not the same as meaningless. Most meaningful things are painfully repetitive while you're doing them. Friendship is often the same conversation continued for 15 years. Love is remembering how someone takes their tea and pretending not to notice that they load the dishwasher like a person seeking revenge against plates. Mastery is repeating one small movement until everybody else calls it talent. Raising a family appears to involve answering the same question approximately 9,000 times. None of this looks particularly impressive in a 15-second clip. It is still a life, In fact, it may be the part of life you eventually miss most. But the internet has trained us to value peaks rather than patterns. The proposal, not the relationship. The medal, not the training. The launch, not the 5 years spent wondering whether the bloody thing would work. The sunset in Bali, not the delayed flight, suspicious bathroom, and Gary arguing with a taxi driver over the equivalent of $3. Gary is having a spiritual awakening. Gary is also being asked to leave the vehicle. The photograph will mention only one of these things. That is not necessarily deception. Nobody posts a complete life. There is no market for a 4-hour live stream titled, "Gary Tries to Remember His Email Password." The problem begins when we forget that everyone else is editing too. You know your own life from the inside, every doubt, repetition, bad angle, unfinished task, and quiet afternoon. You know everyone else's life from the outside, the promotion, the anniversary, the airport lounge, and the photograph taken during the 7 minutes when the family temporarily stopped arguing. You compare your behind-the-scenes footage with their trailer, then conclude that your film is terrible. Absolute genius, but comparison is only half the trap. The other half is that the internet has turned life into a performance, even when nobody's watching. You begin to experience moments through the imaginary eyes of an audience. Is this meal worth photographing? Is this trip impressive enough? Does this hobby make me look interesting? If I go to the gym and fail to publish evidence, will the muscle still understand that it happened? Slowly, the question changes from, "Do I enjoy this?" to, "What would this say about me?" And that is a rotten exchange, because the moment you start living for how life appears, you become separated from how life feels. You can be somewhere beautiful and experience it mainly as a production problem. The light is wrong. The crowd is in the way. The photograph makes your arm look strange. The ocean is doing a magnificent job. But unfortunately, your engagement metrics remain disappointing. So you take 47 pictures of a moment you were barely present for, choose one, publish it, and spend the next hour checking whether strangers have confirmed that you enjoyed yourself. What a marvelous little system we built. Even boredom itself has changed. Boredom used to be an empty room. Now, it is the half second between one piece of stimulation and the next. The lift takes too long, so you reach for the phone. The queue stops moving, so you reach for the phone. Someone you love leaves the table for 90 seconds, and apparently, you must immediately consult the entire planet. Silence begins to feel like a technical fault, and when every spare moment is filled, your ordinary surroundings lose the chance to become interesting. You stop noticing the ridiculous conversations nearby. You stop following a thought long enough for it to become an idea. You stop learning the difference between being unstimulated and being unhappy. Those are not the same thing. Sometimes, nothing is wrong. Nothing is simply happening. But a mind accustomed to constant novelty interprets quiet as deprivation. So, ordinary life must compete with an endless machine offering outrage, beauty, sex, catastrophe, gossip, achievement, and a dog wearing little boots, all before breakfast. Your cup of tea never stood a chance. And yet, notice what happens when life becomes genuinely difficult. When someone is ill, when a relationship ends, when money becomes frightening, when grief enters the room without knocking. You do not dream about becoming more impressive. You dream about an ordinary Tuesday. You want the boring phone call, the familiar meal, the person sitting in their usual chair. You want the uneventful week you once complained had nothing going on. Suddenly, boring looks suspiciously like peace. This is the part nobody appreciates in advance because human beings are talented little idiots. We notice ordinary stability mainly after it has been interrupted. The Wi-Fi works every day and receives no applause. Let it fail for 12 minutes and the household begins collapsing into tribal warfare. Much of a good life works like that. Health is boring until it hurts. Trust is boring until it breaks. Home is boring until you cannot return to it. The people who reliably answer your calls can seem ordinary right up until one day they no longer can. The internet doesn't create this blindness, but it industrializes it. It keeps your attention pointed toward what is absent, the body you lack, the trip you haven't taken, the success that belongs to somebody else. And every minute spent measuring the missing parts makes the present ones harder to see. Now, this does not mean your dissatisfaction is imaginary. Perhaps your job really is draining you. Perhaps your relationship is held together by routine, cowardice, and a shared streaming password. Perhaps you do need to change your body, your habits, your city, or the people around you. Be grateful can become a very polite way of telling someone to tolerate a miserable life. Don't do that. An ordinary life can be beautiful. It can also be genuinely wrong for you. The question is whether you dislike your life when you are actually living it, or only when you're watching somebody else live theirs. That distinction will save you a remarkable amount of unnecessary bullshit. If the dissatisfaction remains when the phone is gone, pay attention to it. It may be information. If it appears only after 40 minutes of scrolling, it may be contamination. You don't need to abandon the internet, buy a cabin and begin communicating exclusively through handwritten letters. That cabin has mold, the letters are slow, and you would miss memes by Thursday. You only need to stop letting the feed serve as the measuring tape for your life. Start by restoring proper scale. One person's extraordinary moment is not everybody's ordinary Tuesday. When you see the mansion, remember that you did not see the mortgage, the argument in the kitchen, or the room nobody uses. When you see the perfect body, remember that you're looking at lighting, timing, selection, and sometimes enough pharmaceutical assistance to frighten a racehorse. Not to dismiss what people have achieved, to see it at the correct distance, then allow parts of your life to remain unperformed. Eat something beautiful without making it audition for the internet. Take a walk that produces no evidence. Enjoy a private joke that would make no sense to an audience. Become good at something before announcing that it is now your identity. Let an experience belong entirely to the people who were there. There's a strange freedom in doing something that cannot improve your image. It reminds you that you are a person, not a struggling media company. And finally, stop asking whether your life looks exciting from the outside. Ask better questions. Do I have people with whom I can be unremarkable? Does my work serve something beyond keeping me occupied? Can I sit inside my own life without constantly needing to escape it? What do I enjoy before anybody else approves? Those questions are less glamorous than, how do I become exceptional? They are also far more difficult to sell products beneath. Maybe your life needs a dramatic change. Or maybe it needs your attention. Maybe the meal is good. Maybe the room is warm. Maybe your friend's terrible story is taking far too long, but you would miss their voice if it disappeared. Maybe nothing cinematic is happening because, for once, nothing terrible is happening either. That is not failure. That is life without background music. Most of your existence will not be a peak experience. It will be small rituals, repeated places, familiar faces, unfinished chores, and ordinary afternoons that seem interchangeable until time begins taking them away. One day, against all logic, you may miss the chair covered in clothes. You may miss the cramped apartment, the noisy neighbor, the job you complained about, the version of yourself who had no idea what was coming next. Not because those things were perfect, because they were yours. So yes, your life may look boring beside the private jets, Bali sunsets, and aggressively symmetrical abdominal muscles. Let it. The internet is very good at displaying lives. It knows remarkably little about living one. Your life was never supposed to entertain an audience. It was supposed to be experienced by you. And perhaps reality has not stopped being enough. Perhaps you have simply been looking at it through the eyes of people who were never there.